Let's move on to the lightning talk. So who's going to talk about Bitwise magic? Okay.
Can I use the...
Yeah, sure. I don't know. 5 minutes. Like it's just 5 minutes, so maybe we can just. I don't know who's having this timer. So is it okay if we have it in a mobile?
Yeah.
like laser pointer or something?
Oh,
It's actually
now.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's on.
I thought it's off. All right, so I'm Lucio, and I'm going to tell you about tiny recreational Bitwise magic that you can use if you want. So I started approximately 10 years ago as a mobile developer, and back then the mobile devices were looking like this, and they were very limited in hardware. So you try to do everything possible to avoid big image files, etc., and everything, so that everything will consume less power and less CPU. So one thing that some people back then might tell you that is that the CPU branches are bad because they might stall the CPU, because they might access, they might bring more memory access in your software, which in reality is not completely right. But let's say that you want to write the absolute value, like function that gets the absolute value of a number. So this is the same way that you would do it if you're not using some kind of standard library, of course. So you have one conditional branch, which will check if it is a negative or positive number and change it. Or you can do it in slightly weirder way without conditional branches and a lot of bitwise arithmetic. So let's do it the weirdest way, and let's see how does it work. Well, to start with, the first line, the most important part that you need to figure out is how 2's complement work. So negative numbers are represented as 0 minus 1. So the easiest way to explain it is just to say if we have 0 and subtract 1 of it, we'll get ones, like all bits will be flipped to ones. If you continue subtracting 1, you can represent any kind of negative number, and it's easy to figure out how it works. So -2 will have 0 at the last bit, -3 will have 0 at the second to the last bit, etc. And the positive numbers are quite easy to represent as well, because you start from 0 and you just add 1 to 0, so that you can represent any kind of number in this way. So if you look closely, you can see that there is some kind of symmetry here. So -2, if you flip all the bits, you get pretty much the same representation as 1, and etc. And it goes the same way for -3, -4, etc., etc. So if you have if you have any kind of a negative number and you add 1 to it and flip all the bits, you get a positive, the modulus of the same number, or the absolute value of that number. So the second line of the complex bitwise program is pretty much shifting all bits of the value to the right, so that at the end you get either 0 if your value was positive, or -1 if your value was a negative number. So this line evaluates to 0 or -1, depending on the value. And now the actual heavy lifting of the program is being done in the last line. How does it work? So XOR truth table, or at least half of it, says that any kind of number XORed with 0 gives the same number. So if your value is positive or 0, then your mask will be 0, and then your expression will just return the same value, which is good, because absolute of a positive value should give back the same value. And for the negative number, if you have a negative value, then XORing with all ones, or -1, as we saw earlier, is actually represented as ones only, will give you back value -1. XORed with all ones will flip all the ones to zeros and all zeros to ones, or also known as the odd bit switcheroo. But wait, we know that there is a symmetry here. So if we get -1, subtract 1 from -2 and subtract 1 from it, we'll get -3. And then if we flip, as we saw in the previous slide, if we flip, we'll get 2. But 2 is actually the absolute value of -2 from where we started. So this is how that complex expression works. And yeah, please don't write code like this unless you want to have some recreational fun with it. So thank you very much.
Next, we have a talk on Django and Mypie.
Can you use this one, or yeah? Okay. Okay, before we finish.
So my name is Pradeep. I wanted to talk about Mypie project, which is optional type checker that you can use in your projects. So the idea is you, just a second. The idea of the Mypie project here is you can have type annotations to your programs. Think of Mypie as a lint or a compiler for your Python programs. And what it does is it can help you show type errors. For instance, this function here has a type annotation which says that this returns an argument, this returns none. And what this indicates to Mypie type checker is to check if there are any type errors. And if you see here, this obviously gives this is an error. But the whole point is to see this error at sort of compile time, you know, in a compile language. The Mypie project has two parts to it. One is the type checker itself. The other is the typeshed project, which gives you these type annotations. Like for instance, when you look at date, the typeshed project says that there is from timestamp on a date which has this type. And the Mypie project depends on these type annotations to do the type checking. And for instance, for other programs, Python programs, like let's look at Django, for example. So if you want to add type annotations, you have to generate these type annotations, or what they call as stubs. And it's easy to do that because Mypie has a tool called stubgen to generate your stubs. And you could say generate stubs for, say, Django.contrib. And it creates this file which you can edit it. Oops, it's empty. So for instance, if you look at a HTTP request, it says that these are the type annotations. And what you can then do is, so you could have these type annotations on you could have your type annotations on your functions. So for instance, this function here, it says that I take a request and return a response. And there is a slight error here, if you see, because the line here, which returns a string, is actually error, because you should return a HTTP response. And Mypie can actually figure out this problem. So you could say, yeah, and you see that it says that this method has a problem. So this could help you reduce the number of tests you have to write. And yeah, that was my talk about Mypie and how to use it.
So thank you, Mr. Pradeep. So now we have another person who's going to talk on mental health.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is PJ. I'll be speaking tomorrow, but I wanted to take a real quick opportunity to talk about Prompt, which is an organization that's trying to start a conversation about mental health in tech. So let's start with the basics. What is Prompt? So a lot of companies, that you work for, they say things like, we want to make life easier. We want to make life easier for our engineers, our developers, our designers, whatever they do, they want to make life easier. And a lot of times, even when you're working for a company that says things like this, you say, make whose life easier? And what they're really talking about is making your work life easier. They want to pay you and give you insurance, and they consider that making your life easier. Like having a job is something that makes your life easier. What we're actually doing is talking about making people's real lives and their mental health better, especially in our tech community. So the next question is, well, why would you need to do that? So as you can see, most industries have like 10 to 15% of people dealing with mental health issues, depression, ADD, eating disorders, what have you, 10 to 15, that seems, but in tech, it's nearly twice that, 20 to 30%. That's a lot. It's a lot of unhealthy people. And I mean, we already know that a lot of developers, designers, people in the tech communities aren't really physically healthy, myself included. But we don't deal with the issue of mental health because we think, oh, well, I use my most important tool, which is my brain, to do my job. Therefore, I can easily use my brain to figure out the problems with my brain. So you kind of see where the problem lies. Everyone says, I'll just fix this for me. I'll be fine. I don't need help. So what we did was we went and we found some speakers. So right now we have 9 speakers. We're looking at expanding that to 11 probably within the next few months. And what they do is they go up on stage and have very real conversations about issues that they've gone through. With depression, with anxiety, with OCD. One of our speakers specifically talks about the fact that they used to code and they would not push anything into the production database, wouldn't even push it to GitHub until they ran the tests 17 times. It had to be 17. Why 17? Who knows? It's a mental health issue. But 17 times they would run the tests. Even if they were green on the first time, they still had to go through it 17 times. And they have very real conversations, and it brings up a lot of introspection for people, so they start to understand maybe this is something that I need to look into as well. So where is Prompt? Anywhere you want us. Our speakers are willing to go wherever they can. We have speakers right now in the EU, in Australia, Ireland, which is part of the EU, but it's like Belfast, so like this really weird place. We have a bunch of speakers in the US, of course. And basically what happens is they submit to CFPs, or someone comes and says, we want a mental health speaker at our conference. We make the arrangements. We take care of making sure they have airfare and hotels and stuff like that, so they're taken care of, so the conference doesn't even have to worry about it. So how does Prompt work? So we started at Engine Yard, which I mentioned on the earlier stage, where I worked, and my colleague Davey, who's actually doing a lightning talk next, worked, and everything was great. But Engine Yard started to go through some things and said, well, we don't want to have that kind of a budget. So luckily, the Travis Foundation came along and said, we will be the bank for Prompt. You guys just get the message out there. So thank you to the Travis Foundation for helping us do that. And now the next thing is, how can you help? So the key thing is we want to end this stigma of mental health in tech. And what does that mean? You have to talk about it. You have to be honest about it. You have to be open about it. And it's not easy to get up on stage and speak. It's even harder to get up on stage and say, I have ADD. And it kind of fucks up my whole life, including when I code, because I go through big things where I'm coding a ton of stuff and little things where I'm not coding anything for 6 weeks because I'm on a roller coaster and who knows where it's going to go. So not everybody can talk about it publicly. So we invite people to write blog posts for us, and we'll publish them. If you want to publish them anonymously, you're more than welcome to. Also, I mean, if you're not willing to do that, share with friends. Just say, hey, listen, I've been going through a tough time lately. I think I might have some issues with depression. Do you think I should talk to somebody? Hopefully they'll be supportive. Everybody has those friends that aren't supportive, but hopefully you're talking to the right friend and you'll get to the right place. When you hear somebody talk about the issues that they have, be open, be supportive of them. If someone comes to you, if you're that friend, just say, hey, maybe you should get some help. And I also know some people who might have some resources for you. And you can direct them to us we're MHPrompt on Twitter. On the web, we're mhprompt.org. We also have a link for funkatron.com/open sourcing mental illness, which is, I think they actually have their own website now. But that's a lot of tools about making your mental issues something that you can talk about in the workplace. And we also you can email us at team@mhprompt.org if you have any questions or if you want to get involved. So that's it for Prompt. I'm PJ. Thank you.
So thank you, PJ, for your talk. And now we have Davey Sheffick, who's going to talk about open source and social responsibility.
All right, so as said, I'm Davey Shaffick, and this is a talk about open source and social responsibility. So I want to talk about lines of code. I should probably turn this on, it'll work a lot better. There we go. So that's what I'm going to start talking about. So who here uses Django? Did you know it was 330,000 lines of code? Flask, 14,500 lines of code. Falcon, almost 15,000 lines of code. But of course, we don't run those on their own. They run on top of Python, right? So CPython is 1.3 million lines of code. A lot of code. You have a web server, it might be Nginx, 150,000 lines of code, or Apache is 500,000. Databases, MySQL, 3.5 million lines of code. Postgres, 1.2 million. If you're web scale, Mongo, 3.2 million. Memcache, 22,000 for scale. But we run those on top of Linux, which is 17 million lines of code for the kernel. It's kind of impressive. So what that means is if you're running a Python stack, which is Postgres, CPython, and Nginx, you're running 20 million lines of code written by thousands of contributors, right? Of course, that a lot of statistics wasn't quite enough for me. I went a little further. I grabbed an Ubuntu server release, and I grabbed every single source package for what's installed by default and counted all the lines of code in those. And you end up with 69.5 million lines of code, which means with the stack, you're looking at over 72 million lines of code. That's a lot, right? So we like to talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. I don't think that's quite right. I think we're at the top of a really big human pyramid. And what do we use that for, right? All of this work that all these people have done for us to give us such a big head start. We built things like Yo, and Tinder, Instagram for gerbils, and Uber for finding lunch. So this gentleman, E.F. Schumacher, said, the poor can be helped to help themselves, but only by making available to them a technology that recognizes the economic boundaries and limitations of poverty. What does this mean? It means that when you're trying to help people, you have to look at the situation that they're in and provide them with tools that are correct for the situation. So if you take a farmer who's in the middle of nowhere and you give him this wonderful tractor, that's great until he runs out of gas. Or what do you say, petrol, whatever. You would be much better served if you actually gave him a couple of oxes. This is something that's sustainable where he lives. Who can tell me the world's most popular cell phone? Close. So it doesn't have this logo, or that one. It is a Nokia. It is the Nokia 1100. Why, right? It has a battery life of 400 hours. It's got like a 4-line screen, but it's dust-proof, and it has a flashlight, which is really important in places that don't have really good electricity. They have sold 500 million of these in various incarnations. You might have noticed last year they announced the Microsoft Nokia 130. It made a big splash as a 27 Australian dollars. And the reason is it's the first phone that actually has a chance at knocking that 1100 off. But it doesn't have like web. It barely does MMS. It doesn't do still images, but it does video. I'm not sure about that, but anyways. So this is every device on the internet. 13.5% of the African population has access to the internet. It's 150 million people. But 82% of them have cell phones. 910 million Africans with cell phones. All right, so knowing this, what can you do? Every 15 minutes, an elephant is killed by a poacher. Imagine if you had an application where somebody could text the authorities to say, hey, I've seen poachers, and they can get that instant notification out there. Every year, 840,000 people die from water-related diseases. What if you could inform someone in a remote village, hey, your water supply isn't safe right now, go find something else? And every year, 1.5 million children die from vaccine-presentable diseases. What if you could inform them, hey, if you walk, a day's walk over here, you can get vaccinations for your children? So there's a lot of problems, and I'm not going to claim that I know the answer to all of them. But what I want to know is how many of you were thinking I could do that to the 3 things that I brought up? What's stopping you? Get out there and change the world. Thank you.
So thank you, Davey, for an awesome talk. And now we have Jonathan, who's going to do the next talk.
All right, I don't have any slides, and I just kind of threw this together today. I'm actually not even a developer. I'm an accountant who is going to be working on an accounting software that every business is going to use. What I mean by I'm not a developer is nobody's ever paid me a single dime to do any development. I live in Los Angeles, and today I'm going to talk about coroutines and generators. A lot of people don't like Python because of the GIL or global interpreter lock. I personally love the global interpreter lock because I start with that, and then if I want to get around it, Python has a lot of tools right now that allow you to do that, asyncio and coroutines and generators. And just real briefly, what is a generator? For who doesn't know here, we have a regular list, right? And if we iterate through the list, it's going to iterate, and if we iterate through the list again, it's going to iterate again. A generator is different because it only gives you an item one by one, and once it's used, it's consumed, you can't iterate it again. So here, here's actually a better example is the bottom one, but you can create a generator of a list by just using the iter function here. But here's a function that creates a generator. You pass in a list, and then as you see, there's a yield on the left, which means it gives you the item, so you have defined generator list, and then you create that. Anyways, the point is, you iterate through a generator, and if I try to iterate through it again, you'll see that nothing happens. Why? Because the generator's been consumed. So that's really what a generator is for anyone who doesn't know what that is. What you see here is the yield is on the left side. So what are coroutines, which I'm going to get into in a second, but quickly, PEP 380 introduced the yield from syntax, and you can't really see this picture very well, but I stole this from a book from O'Reilly, which is called Fluent in Python, and it's a good pictorial. I'm not going to talk about this, but basically what a coroutine or yield from allows you to do is to have a delegating generator, which means that you can have something start something, go into something else, and then have that speak to something else, and then the caller speaks to the ultimate, subject. I forget exactly the terminology, but basically you create this pipeline, and there's some examples. If you look at PEP 380, which is very good for things like parsing. So here's kind of a contrived example that I kind of threw together, and basically what you want to look at is this step one here. And what you'll see is that I have a coroutine, and what a coroutine is basically is that you'll see here the yield went from the left to the right. And so really from a paradigm perspective, it's kind of more like a push versus a pull. And what you do is you push into the generator, and so there's a lot of cool things you can do, and this is kind of a substitute for things like callbacks and very useful for parsing. So basically here I have this function called step one, which I called step one because it's kind of the beginning. And what you can see here is that I create a coroutine, which I called corot, which is probably a bad word, but it goes up to creator here, and you'll see there's item equals yield. And what happens is that this step one, right, takes this coroutine and well, first you have to do what's called priming a coroutine. So any coroutine, you have to first send it a none value, and that's kind of what gets it starting. And then what you see here is for item in gen, and in this case it's my list, what I do is I print the first item of the list, and then I push it. You'll see here coroutine.send send item, so you don't see me calling the function. And what it does is it'll push it into creator one, and then what creator one does is it yields that value, and then it pushes into another generator, and that's on the bottom there, and then so on and so forth. So when you run this, right, what you'll see is in step one, in creator one, in step two, in step one, in creator two, in step one, in creator three. And so what happens is these can all communicate together, and it's really awesome. And if you read it, you'll see more stuff. And in PEP 492, there's new keywords that instead of using yield from, use async and await keywords. So check it out. And if you use it together with asyncio, there's a lot of cool stuff. A lot of people like to use Go. I would rather pull my hair out than use curly brackets. But you can do everything that Go does with Python using these libraries. Thank you very much. And if anyone is interested in working on accounting software, talk to me. I don't have much money, but...
Thank you, Jonathan. And now the next talk, yeah, it's by Johannes.
Hello. Can I code? I think most of you have thought about this when you were young, when you didn't know how to code. I think it's a common question that everybody asks themselves before they've really experienced somebody giving them good feedback on anything they write. Can I contribute? So, okay, you can write code in your little dark room, but would anybody actually have a value of this code? Would I dare to put it out on the internet? Does my life matter for other people? Right? That's the core question. So I have good news for you guys. You are important. Your code matters. What you create can really affect other people. So in my experience, almost everybody I talk to, including myself, underestimate the impact you have on the people you meet. And when I was 17, I went in a gymnasium here in Sweden. I met a couple of cool people, nerds, computer people. They were running something called Birdie, which was sort of a LAN festival demo party. Anybody heard of Birdie before? A few people? Good. It was scary. I didn't really know what to do, but I decided to join them and help. Back then in 2001, there was no economy. We didn't have any things to use for this lawn party, this demo party. So basically, after spending half a year planning, 4 days of very little sleep and a lot of hard work, all the volunteers had to put out 500 kroner out of their own pocket to cover for the party. And then a few years later, we had 1,000 people instead of 300, and we had network for all of them. Eventually, I became a chairman of the förening. We actually had a förening then. We didn't have in the beginning. It was just a non-organized entity. We managed to do a generationsskifte, so a lot of people, me and I, left. And it was something that is obviously known to a few people, and also within like the city of Uppsala, which is the place where this computer festival is taking place. Even people in the Handelskammaren and the Kommun now recognize this entity. Next thing, Uppsala Tech Meetup 2011, no meetups in Uppsala. I started with a few lightning talks in 2014, 15 people, a little meetup. We now have 450 members in the group. We have monthly meetups there. We are now at PyCon, arranged by Python Sweden. There was nothing back in 2013. And 3 years of PyCon with, I think it's probably even 700 people that have attended these conferences, something like that, today. And 2020, your imagination is the limit. You can join, just like I did when I was 17, joining Birdie. You can do lots of great stuff with this förening. There is a lot of resources, people, and energy. So think about what you could do if you think you can make a difference. Yes, go for it. You know, and join in and contribute. I think this can be something really cool over the coming years. And don't be afraid. Go into there, read a stadgar, you know, go to picon.se. Or maybe there's a local project in your city, in your hometown, you know. There are many ways to contribute, but I think PyCon and Python Sweden is a very good resource to put your energy into if you want to. Thanks.
Thank you, Johans. And the next lightning talk is going to be on the topic coding in the tropicals.
So hello everybody, my name is Erin, and I'm going to give you a very biased talk about leaving the security and the certainty of Sweden and maybe head out somewhere else to do your coding with whatever that can mean. Okay, so 4 years ago, me and my family, we left for Colombia. Colombia is where the red circle is, for you who don't know. And if you go there, yeah, I'm living just 2 hours from the Pacific, which means that I'm living in a city which is about 4 million people. And it's big as crazy because it's very flat. So from one end to the other end takes about an hour to go normally without any traffic, something like that. So that's where I'm living. And yes, I have a swimming pool just outside of the door. It's wonderful weather, always summer. So what I'm going to do here is saying that it's not better always, but it's definitely different. So it comes down to a few things. However, if I'm saying that I'm living in Colombia, most of you will have a thought in your mind, and I'll tell you this much. Your perception distortion is exactly the same as they do have about Sweden. Because they think that in Sweden there are no problems with schools, healthcare, or anything else. And you have your thoughts about them as well. So, going with there, why do we live there? Well, quality of life. I live in a city where stress is actually ugly. It's regarded as something bad. So people don't do it, really. That's what they do. So it's a small city, as I said. But this is how it looks like. So it's flat and it's kind of very wide. But it's in an agricultural scene. So where the city is near, everything else is near as well. It has some upsides. I have quality coffee on my table every day, and I have various sorts, I can tell you. Great coffee. Hot temperature, I don't know if you can see this one, but it's normally 30 degrees. That's the average temperature, actually. It can turn up to 36, 37 in a normal day as well, which means that we have air conditioning at the office, of course. Well, with warm people, people are loosening up, and also you have the possibility to relax or go dancing whenever, actually. I live in a city where people dance 7 days a week if they want to, until 5 o'clock in the morning for those who wants to do that as well. But as I said, you also have other things, and this is a picture taken with the Andes just in behind, when I was out riding with some friends. That's a normal way of spending evenings, if you want to. And people are very open, and this is the type of gatherings you do very often. You just sit down with people that you know, and you take the time actually to enjoy people and know friends. Meeting people, inviting people for dinner. It doesn't take 3 weeks to actually assemble the dinner to come down to the calendar. This one was done 2 hours before. It's the normal, spontaneous life. So, as I said, no stress. Keep calm, and there is no stress, unless you really want to. But it has some downsides, of course, as well. And some of the downsides are, yes, as you could figure out, if you're talking to the handyman, he also goes with the no stress one. I just got my chair back, one of the dining room chairs back, that was away for 5 weeks, I thought, but it was actually away for 4 months, because he didn't have the way passing by. You need to be on to people to get things done. Luckily enough, I'm working with coders that are really doing their job good. So you do have a security problem, because it's it's a country with very big economical differences. So where those differences are basically in friction, you do have criminality. So you need to watch out for yourself, but you actually do have no problems. I haven't had any problems in 4 years. I haven't had more than initial problems 16 years ago when I was there, and it was really a chaos in that country. Then I had initial problems with someone stealing my laptop. Obviously, they haven't done it now for 14 years, so nothing there. Internet can be shaky. If you think that you're living online here all the time, just remember that I'm always having a backup plan for living offline. So I'm always having an ebook or something else, and that might be that. Why do I live offline sometimes? Well, sometimes the sun makes it very warm, and making it very warm makes people very slow, and that's very nice too, but as I said, it's very warm. You have things as rain, and this is a typical aguacero, where you can see how it's raining, and it's actually wintertime, it goes like this. Aguacero means water with zero visibility, and which it is at those times. And that gives you the next one, and that is actually aguacero causes blackouts in the electrical outlets. So this is where I'm getting somewhere sometimes. Thank you.
So thank you. And the next topic is gonna be let's encrypt.
Hello. So, as you can see, is Let's Encrypt. Since I screwed up last time and had misplanned my schedule for the talk, I had to skip over this part. So, what is Let's Encrypt? It's a Acme protocol client and a public certificate authority to get your own TLS certificates. It does domain validation automatically, which means that it verifies that you control the web server that you want a certificate for. It does this automatically. It generally takes around 5 to 10 seconds for you to type the first command until you have the TLS configuration up and running. And it generates short-lived certificates. Normally, in the web, we use 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, which is just enough time to forget who's responsible, who is paying for what bills, and which company we're actually hosting it with. And Let's Encrypt generates 3 months length certificates, and you can automatically renew them. So, Let's Encrypt. On Ubuntu 16.04, latest release, this is actually all you need to run to get a certificate installed, running, and in place. Apt install Let's Encrypt to get the command line. It's in the repository. Let's Encrypt, cert only in this case, because we only want the certificate. and -d-example.com. It will give you a nice little view of asking you for your mail address and then giving you a certificate. That's all. On other platforms, you have to clone the Let's Encrypt repository, run the same tool, and in this case with the --Apache flag, which will automatically certify it, download it, configure Apache for you to use your certificate and have everything in place. It really is that easy right now. For others, you can do other methods. So, once every 3 months seems like easy enough. Let's Encrypt Renew will automatically renew outdated certificates. It will store all the configuration changes it needs when it sets it up and place them in place. You might have to put this into cron. You will also get a handy email around 1 month before your first certificate runs out, which tells you, hi, it's time to renew it. Up until a while ago, that was buggy, so it would send that even if you had renewed it. Oops. Next, not enough to just have a certificate. I recommend the Mozilla SSL configuration generator. This one will let you pick your web server, how you're targeting, if you're targeting old environments, which is Windows XP, if you're targeting modern things, or if you're targeting something in between. You pick your server version, Apache, Nginx, Lighty, whatever, your OpenSSL version, and it generates a configuration file for you to just paste into place. The bit.ly link goes to the same link as the Mozilla GitHub bio, but it's a lot shorter if you want to take a picture of it. So, I skimmed over this one. Cherry Pie Hello World was from my previous talk. This is really the Cherry Pie easiest version of saying hi. This one will start a web server for you, saying hello world. There's nothing really important here. The reason I picked Cherry Pie is because it has built-in support for TLS. So you add these 4 lines which point to your certificate, and you have a built-in TLS server. It really is that simple to start it and get it up and running. And this is the result you get from SSL Labs with that default config that we just saw, A-, because it's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. For most other web frameworks, you will end up with having to run it behind a proxy or something like that because the built-ins don't support TLS. So, thank you. That's all.
So, this concludes today, I think. Everyone got their drink tickets? So, if no one has anything else to add, I think the first day is finished. And grab your tickets and head out to the bar.